We all wanna be heard. We all want to be seen. We all wanna be valued as a part of the team. And when we're working together, we do it much better. Here's to the dream. Education is liberation, but application's the key. It's called social emotional learning. Tables is turning, we getting free. Bringing our whole selves to the journey. Healing the herd, who bigger than we. Self-aware and prepared. Only good vibrations in the air. Only we control what we share. Hip-hop airs with the vision that's clear and the mission sincere. Like, yeah, 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 yeah. Culture, for the culture, yeah, yeah. Culture, for the culture, yeah, yeah. We set the trends and do the motion, with the pick and pose, yeah, yeah. Hip hop all across the globe, yeah. Do it for the culture, yeah, yeah. You know we do it for the culture.
What's going on, everyone? How's everybody feeling? All right, I see Brooklyn is in the virtual building, New York. All right, let's blow up the chat. Where's everybody hailing from? Let's blow up the chat. All right, we got H-Town, we got Houston, Long Island, more specifically. All right, let's see, B more. Right. We got Dr. Johnson, all right, Chi-Town, Seattle, Boston, Portland. Oh, shucks. All right, yes, thank you for the shout out for our theme song. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Jamila Sams. I'm the founder of We Do It for the Culture, which is the only culturally responsive social emotional learning curriculum rooted in hip hop culture, current events, and storytelling for grades 6 through 12. And tonight, we are preparing ourselves to have an amazing experience discussing all things hip hop, social emotional learning, and the classroom of life. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off with a bar for one of my favorite tracks, Education. This verse is actually from one of my favorite MCs. I am from Philly, so Black Thought. Peace, parishioners, onlookers, and listeners. Visitors keeping the consumption conspicuous. Kids graduating from public schools and prisoners. Underprivileged, Aboriginal, Indigenous. Sent image of that family that got adopted. The president of some nonprofits is out of pocket. I heard the world ending is trending. I try to watch it. I focus on sinning when winning was not an option. The system we compete against is farm to table, hand picking them ingredients, civil disobedience. Encyclopedia definition of greediness, gluttony. Please take heed of who you treaty with. Who are you aligning yourselves with? All right, Black Thought on Mad Lib's Education. These are bars that paint the picture of where we are right now. A system where ignorance is rewarded, where Dame Dash and Cameron beef is being grown and served farm to table, and where greed gets passed off as normal. But hip hop has always been our education and real world application. It's always been the teacher when the system couldn't or wouldn't teach what we needed. And at a moment when education budgets are being cut and social emotional learning is being stripped from schools, the culture has to respond the way it always has, through truth, storytelling, and teaching. KRS-One told us, you must learn. And Dead Prez broke down these schools, teachers, were never really built as the foundation for liberation, especially post-desegregation. Bars. Tonight is a reminder that the classroom is bigger than four walls, and hip hop has always been one of the most powerful teachers that we've had. We've got three incredible voices with us this evening. First up, we have Dr. Lauren Lee Kelly. Let's give some virtual air horns in the chat. All right, Dr. Kelly is an associate professor at Rutgers University and the founder of the Hip Hop Youth Research and Activism Conference. A former high school English teacher in New York, she developed courses in hip hop literature, spoken word, and theater arts. Her research centers on critical literacy, Black feminist theory, hip hop pedagogy, and youth agency in shaping collective futures. All right, give it up for Dr. Kelly. So happy to have you this evening. And I'm just like in all of the work that you've been doing. And I just absolutely love the book. So great to see you, sis. Next up, Dr. Edmund Ajapong. Air horns in the chat. Edmund Ajapong is an educator, author, scholar, and community-based practitioner who uses hip hop culture as a transformative tool in education. He is the director of the Hip Hop Culture, Equity, and Excellence Academy and the Associate Professor of Educational Studies at Seton Hall University. His work explores culturally responsive pedagogy, youth culture, and equity-driven education, focusing on how hip-hop fosters connection, positive outcomes, and challenges systemic inequities in K-12 and beyond. So great to have you tonight, Doc. All right, next up, we have Ruben Vincent. Ruben Vincent, MC extraordinaire. Light up the chat for Ruben. All right, there he is. All right. It came up with the peace sign, double peace. All right, Ruben Vincent is a 22-year-old rapper, producer, and Rock Nation signee from Charlotte, North Carolina, known for his lyrical dexterity, social consciousness, and sharp wordplay. A student of hip hop's lineage, he has worked with Knife Wonder, toured with Rhapsody, and built a catalog balancing social commentary, introspection, and illusion-heavy rhymes. Vincent's music reflects wisdom beyond his years as he pushes the culture forward. All right, thank you so much for joining us, Ruben. No mumble rap here, strictly bars with Ruben Vincent. He's gonna make you think. All right, and next up, I am so proud to introduce my colleague, MC Kareem McQuilkin. Air horns in the chat for Kareem. He is our MC. He is our master of curriculum. Haha. Peace, Kareem.
What's up, Jamila? What's going on, everybody?
All right, I'm handing it over to you, and let's get to it.
All right, yeah. So we're gonna get right to it. So I still got some bars, right? I'm somewhat of an MC, but these days MC stands for Master of Curriculum. I also serve as the education manager at We Do It for the Culture, and I'm excited to be here with you all today. We're gonna be diving into why hip hop is SEL while combining research and lived experience. All right, so we're going to get right into today's session, and it's only right that we start this off with some bars, all right? So, Ruben, I got a question for you, right? On your record, Surfing with Ninth Wonder, you say, I was surfing through the storm, purging through the norm in the fear of the unknown. Can you break those bars down for us? What message would you want a middle school or high school student to take from those bars?
I mean, the biggest thing I would want a middle schooler, anybody that's in school, to take from those bars is the simple fact that hard times don't last and trials and tribulations are part of our it catapults you into, you know, what you need to know and what you need to become aware of. And I feel like at the time when I wrote Surfing, I was going through some life changes that, you know, were a little bit hard, you know what I'm saying, some struggles. So that's why I say I was surfing through the storm, you know what I mean? Imagine being out on sea, you know what I mean, and it's storming and you trying to ride through the, you know, through the sea on that. That's what the imagery I was trying to capture, and purging through the norms in the fear of the unknown. You know, a lot of times I feel like as people, we can, you know, we're scared of what we don't know. You know, we're scared of the uncomfortable, you know, even down to certain habit changes. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I might want to change my lifestyle, and you're in the fear of the unknown of what can happen if I do this. What happens if I change this? So those were certain questions that I was going through at the time. And, you know, it furthermore like catapulted me into like success, you know, all of the things and the struggles that I went through. So that's what I want people to take from that.
Nice. Thank you so much. There's so much SEL, social emotional learning lessons that are embedded right within just those 3 bars right there, right? And we know that when we, like Jamila started off with those Black Thought bars, there's so many lessons that could be delivered through us to us in different formats, right? So
Sure.
um I'm gonna come over to our professors and educators who are in the research field. And I'm gonna start off with you, Dr. Kelly. Right? We know hip hop is both a global culture and a personal identity for many students and teachers. So, how can educators use hip hop to create culturally affirming spaces that connect with social emotional learning competencies such as self awareness and social awareness?
I love that. That's a beautiful question. And I think the great thing is teachers don't really have to do much because hip hop already does that, right? Like hip hop culture, hip hop music, hip hop identities are already creating that space. So as teachers, all we really have to do is invite that in, right? Especially, I taught in secondary, I taught high school English. So in secondary spaces, by the time students had me, they'd already been told throughout their entire schooling history that hip hop was not educational, right? It wasn't academic, it wasn't scholarly, it wasn't research, it wasn't writing, it wasn't any of the things that we're trying to do in school. So for me, the work and the challenge was trying to reframe how students saw hip hop culture and hip hop literacies and how they saw the classroom as being intertwined. But once students have that framing, once teachers have that framing, it's already doing that. It's about inviting in those conversations. And so I think for me, and really, I think a lot of it depends on who your students are and their age and the subject area. For me, it was about inviting dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we can provide as teachers that young people may or may not have at home, right? Depending on who's at home, siblings, aunts, uncles, parents, depending on what kind of conversations they have with their friends. I know as a teenager, I was talking to my friends about music, but it was about like who had the best skill? Did you hear this bar? This album's coming out. We weren't like deeply analyzing the music. We weren't asking each other, why do you connect to this artist? Why do you connect to this album? Right? Because that's like feelings. And we didn't really do feelings like that as adolescents. I think they do it more now, but
Yeah.
it's still different. And so creating spaces where it's safe and where it's
Yeah.
invited and accepted and really celebrated to bring in those feelings, to have the conversations that move beyond the lyrics themselves and that really talk about why this song, why this artist, what are you seeing here, what do you connect to, what are you envisioning, how does this help you think about yourself in beautiful ways? Those are the conversations they're usually not having out loud. And so I think that's what we need to do as teachers, is invite those conversations in, and normalize them.
Yeah. I heard a bar right in there. How do you help think of how can you think about yourself in beautiful ways, right? I love the way that you frame that, right? And I want to come to you, Dr. Ajapong, and I want to ask you the same question, but I'm going to add an additional layer to it, right? So the question is, how can educators use hip hop to create culturally affirming spaces that connect with SEL competencies such as self-awareness and social awareness? And then the layer I'm going to add to that is, what advice would you give to a teacher that might feel they don't know enough about hip hop to implement hip hop pedagogy?
Yeah, that's a dope question. I think, we focus on social awareness and identity. I think it's important to recognize that there's so many young people and people in general who have a specific and unique connection to hip hop, right? So, adding on to what Dr. Kelly shared earlier, is just about the first step is just inviting it in, right? Not criminalizing it, not like critiquing it negatively, like just being curious about it and trying to understand like how do young people connect to this? And as an adult, how do I connect to it, right? And also recognizing that hip hop is also, while it's a culture, within culture, there are different generations within our cultures, right? And different generations engage in different things in different ways, right? So like my mom is like, yo, she got a cell phone. She's like, yo, how can you help me use a cell phone? I don't know how to do this app or this app, but you give her a corded phone and she's good to go, right? Similar to us as we engage in hip hop. I'm noticing as I'm coming up, that I'm engaging in hip hop in very different ways than my students are engaging in hip hop. And I think that's very important to recognize and acknowledge, but also be okay with that, right? Because there's often a discomfort. And as an adult in the classroom in the space, you're like, yo, this is my space. I'm facilitating, I'm leading. This is my perspective, right? And what I urge and encourage educators to recognize, like, yo, we all have different perspectives and connections to hip hop culture. So how can we create the dialogue and create a space where we can invite all of that in at the same time, right? And I think in addition to how do we I'm forgetting the second question.
So I got you. So what advice would you give to a teacher that
Ah,
might feel they don't know enough about hip hop?
yeah. Yo, you know, we all have something to learn when it comes to hip hop. You know what I mean? Whether it's different perspective, right? A different reality. And it's just about either going out there and learning and exploring your own. It doesn't have to be solely through hip hop music, right? There's hip hop journalism, there's hip hop movies, TV shows, right? Um, and there's also your students who are right in front of you, right? So how do you create that space to invite them in? And you could be like, yo, listen, to me, I think Jay-Z's the best rapper of all time. When I talk to my students and I get blue in the face about this, and my students in college, they're like, yo, Jay-Z who? The guy who's married to Beyonce? I'm like, what are you talking about? The guy who's married to Beyonce, right? But
Yeah.
I can share my perspective, right? And I can allow my young people to share theirs. And if I'm somebody who has no idea about hip hop, it's really about just inviting creating that dialogue, right? And inviting that in. But also creating a space to be like, yo, if there are things that make you uncomfortable about hip hop, right? Share that with your students, right? And then let's see what they got to share. How can they defend and critique and highlight what they appreciate about hip hop to bring you in, right? And also, I also tell educators, like, while we have students in front of us who can support us in that, it's also our responsibility to go out and do some learning on our own, right? We can't solely dictate and expect young people to solely lead us. Like, what is it like to go out and do that work on your own? There's so many multimodal ways to engage in hip hop that's not solely music, that I encourage educators to explore.
Yeah, I love that you use that example of it's not solely music, right? We know there are 5 elements of hip hop, right? And we know the foundational one to me is knowledge of self, right? And we know in the Bronx when hip hop was created, it was really an outlet for young people, particularly Black and brown young people who were unheard, right? And oftentimes we know in school communities, students are unheard, right? Just the other day, I was leading a training and I asked teachers, how many of you speak to your students about their experience in your classroom? You might not do it every day, right? But do you have a system in place where you could just sit down and have some dialogue with them to learn about what adjustments you can make, learn what they really like about your class and what they might want more of or less of? And not enough hands went up, right? So I thank you for that. And Jamila just dropped in the chat the 5 elements of hip hop. You know, Jamila is always schooling me. Anything before 1999, yeah, you might catch me slipping. So she's always there to remind me and test me. So yeah, I love the insight that y'all drop, right? So we're gonna go a little bit deeper now, right? We just got the conversation warmed up. So I'm gonna circle back to you, Ruben, right? So we know when I listen to your music, right, it's a teaching tool. Like Jamila said, it's not mumble rap, right? I can see that every bar is well thought out, even your videos, right? And the
Yes,
imagery in your videos, right? So
definitely.
how do you see your role as both an MC and an educator, right? Like while you're in the studio, you know that message, right? You're alone in the studio. You may have a couple people with you, but when you're in the booth, you're alone. But you know the message you share is going to go out to the masses, right?
Mhm.
So why is it so important for you to be so thoughtful in everything that you share, both verbally and visually, and really considering those your age or younger?
Mm, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing for me is a lot of my mentors it's each one teach one. You know, they always say like, "Hey man, when we pass you the torch, all you should do is pay it forward." And I think about also obviously me being the age that I am, I wasn't around for it, but the one thing I did when I first got my foot in the door was I had to do my research. I have to be a student and go back. And I think the biggest thing that I learned when I went back, and it's funny, ironically, yes, the other day I was chilling with my girlfriend and we were watching like old music videos. And one of the videos we was watching was My Philosophy by KRS-One. Like just a lot of those records from that time. But when you're listening to the lyrics, it's not them just writing bars down just to get them off or whatever. They were educating. And I think the dopest thing for me about hip hop is the simple fact that we can make both worlds come together in a form of poetry, right? And make it look cool. Like even with KRS One in that video, like I wasn't alive at that time. But when I look back at the video, he had the cement threes on, you know what I'm saying? He had the Jeep in the back, he had the gold chains, but he's talking about certain foods you're not supposed to eat and just, all the stuff he was talking about. So I think the reason why it's important for me is because if I knew if I was going to have my hand in this culture, I knew I had to carry the torch of what my forefathers did before me. And also, one thing Nipsey also says is the highest human act is to inspire, right? So my favorite rappers growing up, if we take the KRSs out, but let's go a little bit further, like the Kendrick Lamars, the J. Cole's, even the Jay-Z's, the Nas's, these were people who I felt like had more depth than just, oh, I'm just trying to spit a sweet 16 to you and woo you off the ground. Like I remember going on Rap Genius and being like, what does this mean? Or, hey, what is he talking about here? You know what I mean? And I feel like for me, I wanted to be very intentional once I got my foot in the door to do that because I knew that I have little brothers. I have a 15-year-old little brother, you know what I mean? And I knew his generation was going to be the ones listening to my music. And I felt like if I was going to make any impact, it was going to have to be putting the medicine in the cake. So that was the method to my madness for me.
The medicine in the cake, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be transparent, right? So I'm 39, right? And I
Yeah.
think the first time I heard you 2 years ago, I was 37, right? And
Yeah.
I shared this with you when I met you. That when I heard that Humble Souls mixtape, you really stood out to me. And when I listened to that, right, I could tell that you studied the greats,
Sure. For sure.
right?
Most
And I share that because a lot of times I think, my generation or older, we feel like there's nobody out there that's really spitting like we used to back in the day.
right.
So I just want to thank you for being a student of the game, right? And that connects with what Dr. Ajapong said is, there's an element of we gotta do the work,
Yeah.
right?
For sure.
Right.
For
People
sure.
could give us game and we could listen to everybody else, but at some point we got to say, all right, you know what? I want to go and do a deep dive myself to cultivate my own relationship with this thing that we love, known as hip hop, or anything that we love in general. So thank you for breaking that down. So I want to I'm gonna bring it now back to the professors, right? Because that's like the perfect segue, right? Your album and your music, Ruben, right? That's what inspires a lot of the listeners, right? But we also know that Dr. Kelly and Dr. Ajapong, you all have listeners as well, right? And those are the students in your classroom, and those are the people who read your books, right? So I want to give you an opportunity to tell us more about that. So I'm gonna start off with you, Dr. Ajapong. So I know that you have your book, Teach Like a MC, right? Can you tell us more about your book and why you chose to write that book?
Yeah, man, like Teach Like an MC has been, it's like a, it's like a child. I always tell everybody, it's like this, like my baby. This book is an extension of, a decade-long research that I've been doing since I was a teacher in the Bronx. And just really like looking for opportunities and to explore how can we utilize hip hop as pedagogy, right? I know a lot of folks utilize hip hop in different ways, right? But for me, I'm really looking at like how can we empower teachers to leverage hip hop in the most authentic way that connects with themselves and that also connects with their students. So my work really looks at how do we leverage the five creative elements as approach like teaching strategies, right? So we look at knowledge of self, for example, is what we just talked about. And when I see knowledge of self, I think about how, like, we're talking about Ruben Vincent, how artists are leveraging their platforms as social, like to spread social justice, to raise social awareness. So how can we get young people, right, to be more critical of the world around them through their interactions and engagement with hip hop? So it could be through lyric analysis, right? But it could also be just interrogating their local community, right? Like how can we raise our social awareness around any issue, right? Another example would be graffiti, right? Graffiti is another element of hip hop. Like how can we create more visual arts applications for teaching and learning, right? When you think I'm a science educator, a lot of scientific concepts there's like a one like traditional diagram for it, right? And we realize and we know that not everybody thinks and connects content in the same way. So how can we leverage and encourage young people to create their own visual representation to deepen their understanding of learning. So my work really just looks at hip hop as like this culture that young people connect and engage in. Um, outside of school spaces. So how can we bring that into school space to make the content more relevant, more engaging, and more connected to them? And this book really also just like we look at the history of education and that, Black folks and people of color have always been the ones to liberate themselves within our country, right? Since they set foot on this land, and we will continue to do so. So it's really important for me to empower young people and teachers to leverage hip hop as a culture and an artifact to engage in this work.
That's dope. Hey, we got a question in the chat, Dr. Azurpan. She asked, Diana Johnson asks, where can I buy your book?
I think wherever books are sold. I know Amazon, the book is published by Heinemann. So if you go to the Heinemann's website, I'll put in the chat in a second. There might be a teacher discount there for folks. So, and the audio book is dropping soon if you'd like to listen to my beautiful voice.
Yeah, that's dope. And we're gonna share this chat with everybody after. We're gonna send a follow-up email with all the information where you can get the albums, the books, etc. Dr. Azurpan, when I saw your book, the title first, I was like, yo, the next PD. I'm not in front of kids all the time. I was like, yo, the next PD I facilitate, like I'm gonna be coming in there, like I would really make sure I tap into that MC spirit, right? And just the title alone makes it more fun. I wish I had something like that. I mean, we had Teach Like a Champion by Doug Lamar, right? I would have much preferred Teach Like an MC to be my entry point into being a teacher. So thank you for that. Yeah, and so Dr. Kelly, right? I want to talk about your book, Teaching with Hip Hop in the 7 to 12 Classroom, right? Why did you decide to write this book? And I'm gonna have a follow-up question for you related to your favorite chapter, and we're gonna do a deeper dive. But just the first part, why did you decide to write this book?
So those and shout out to all the fam that's in the chat. We have a lot of hip hop educators and community members out here with us. Those who know me know I'm very literal when I'm answering questions. So I'm going to give you a very literal answer, but then I can explain the content of the book. So what happened was I started teaching hip hop based courses about 13, 14 years ago in the high school classroom. And when the word started to get out, this was a thing and it was happening and it was working, whatever that means, I would get cold emails from teachers around the country, some even around the world, but mostly in the US, asking, all right, what do I do? Like, you don't have to convince me, but how do I actually do this? And me being me, I was sending them like 50 documents. Like they would get a reply from me. We're strangers. And it would be like, here's some worksheets, here's some assignments, here's the rubrics. But then also I was like, I can't just send you this stuff with no context. So then the email body would also have like, so if you're doing this, consider this, you might want to change it up for this. You're in Kentucky. So like I was spending hours sending these individual emails to teachers to help them sort of use this work in the classroom. And at a certain point, I was like, this is so inefficient because I was sending some of the same documents, but the context was just different. And I realized that this would probably be better for everyone if a book existed that had all this information. But I also didn't want to pretend that what I did in my classroom in New York in an 11th and 12th grade classroom was necessarily going to work for your 7th grade students in Wisconsin, right? And so I thought it was really important to create a text. And I not only had the units and the lessons and assessments, because oftentimes we forget about that piece, right? And those who are in K-12 classrooms, like you can't just have these cute lessons and not have assessments, right? You have to have grades. You have to have assessments that are rigorous, right? That align with the standards. So I wanted to make sure I took into account all the context that teachers teach within, because sometimes they'll show up to a workshop and they're like, this is great, but like, how does this actually fit into social studies, right? How does this fit with the things I have to teach mice and men. That doesn't go away, right? I can't replace that with Reuben Vincent's work, right? So how can I incorporate his work in a way that doesn't like make me lose my job? So I really had all of that in my head as I was creating this. And so it has lessons, it has unit examples, assessment examples, but also with the context of here's why I developed this. You might want to do things in other ways depending on your context, but also I have stories because I think it's important that we learn through stories and we learn what to think about or what to be cautious about. So I have stories of things that like didn't go well, right? we say there's an article that Don Sawyer and I wrote about when keeping it real goes wrong around using hip hop pedagogy in the classroom and it like not working out the way we think it will. And I think it's really important to embrace the missteps or the things that weren't thought through or just didn't go well to do better. And oftentimes in hip hop ed, especially in sort of the earlier 2000s, we put so much work into just letting people know it was real and it was legitimate and it was a thing that there kind of wasn't room for error. You couldn't talk about the mistakes, you couldn't talk about what didn't go well. And so I really wanted to lead with the humility of like, this was a mess, right? And then this white teacher was like speaking patois, but like has never spoken patois and hasn't been to the islands. And it was wild and no one knew what to do. But I tell those stories that teachers can read and say, like, oh, okay, how will I avoid that in my classroom, right? And so there's a ton of agency. It's not like just take this and copy it and use. In fact, it says do not just copy this and use it. Think about who's in your room, right? If most of your students are from Malaysia, some of these things won't actually be culturally relevant, right? So just think about who's there, who's not there, what might be cultural appropriation, right? If it's all white students, maybe you're looking at Macklemore, right? Maybe Eminem. But if you're in a wealthy suburban school environment, maybe not Eminem, right? Because they may not really connect to and understand his music. So I want teachers to walk away from this book really understanding how contextually specific this work is. It's not a one size fits all. It's not, I saw a video of Chris Emden doing this, and so I'm going to be like him. But you may not have students, right? You might have very different students than he does. So consider who you are. And this is something that Dr. Ajapong talks about in his book in a really powerful way is like, who are you? Who are you to do this work, right? Can you do this excavation of your own identities that you're showing up in ways that are authentic and inviting students to do that? And so that's a long way of saying it is for teachers to be real in the classroom and invite students to do the same.
Yeah, I love what you said. It's for teachers to be real, right? And what you said about sharing stories about when things didn't go well, right? Because we all have those moments as educators and as teachers, right? And our hope is that when we share when things didn't work out, then we can share what we learned from that, and then hopefully others will embrace that that's just a part of the process, right? That's just a part of our journey as educators. So yeah, that's powerful. It made me think about freestyling, right? Sometimes, like I said, back in the day, I used to rap with freestyle more. 15 years later, sometimes I'm a little nervous. I ain't gonna lie. I'm like, I don't want to mess up. I see Tim Jones in the chat, freestyle extraordinaire. So shout out to the whole hip hop ed fam in here. Um, so, Dr. Kelly, what's your favorite chapter in your book and why? If you have, you may have several favorites.
It's all my favorite. I love, sometimes you write something and you go back and you're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Every time I read it, I'm like, no, this was it. I think my favorite is chapter 4, which talks about teaching hip hop as a content area. So
Uh-huh.
the other chapters are designed for folks who are teaching across grade levels, across subject areas to really infuse it with the standards. Their standards are there. I don't love that the standards are there because it seems like I am reinforcing the standards, but also like they're real and teachers need to have them in their lessons. So they're there for you. Um, but chapter 4 talks specifically about, let's say you have this amazing opportunity, whether it's K-12 or higher ed, to teach a class about hip hop, which is so rare, but also growing in popularity across the country, across the world. And so then it guides you through, if that's the case, so this is not just like on a Tuesday or one unit, but this is the whole class. Cool. Here's some things to think about. And it gets back to that question that you'd asked Dr. Ajapong earlier around how do teachers do this if they don't have a background in hip hop, whatever that means, right? Because at this point, it's hard to not know something about hip. It's everywhere. It's in all the commercial. You can't look at a car commercial, a cereal commercial, and it's
Right.
not like, whoop, there it is. So it's there. But um, if you already feel like you are an expert in this thing, you're less likely to be as curious as Dr. Ajapong was sharing, right? You're less likely to ask students for suggestions. You're less likely to have the humility that's really required to teach this thing that should be about your students, right? Like we can't treat this like it's just another history class. Like it's just another English class. Here's the canon, right? And it's the Odyssey, it's Biggie, it's Pac. A 15-year-old may not care about any of those people, right? So what makes this culturally relevant if it's the same old stuff, right? If it's just another history class. And so it talks about how you can really lean into the curiosity of not knowing, how you can
Yeah.
be humble. If you consider yourself an expert and like a hip hop OG, how can you let go of some of that in order to be sort of open and porous to your students and learning things about them, because ultimately it's actually not about hip hop, right? It is bigger than hip hop. As Deborah said, it's about your students, right? And it's about their futures and their future building. And so it can't be about, I know all these bars, these are the best. You need to memorize Big Daddy Kane's lyrics. That can't be what it's about. So,
Yeah.
favorite chapter.
So when we share these resources with you, chat, after today's webinar, please dive in, because when Jamila and I are out there working with different schools across the country, that's one of the things we're always repeating. It really just comes down to storytelling, right? And if we could respect and want to understand and learn about each other's stories, that's hip hop, right? And we don't have to overthink it or overcomplicate um, this beautiful this beautiful experience that we have in the classroom. So thinking about the classroom, right, and just what we hope teachers do. Ruben, I'm going to come to you. What are there? Were there any experiences that you had with teachers that you felt helped you hone into or tap into your lyrical abilities or your love for hip hop?
Yes, ironically, I was in fifth grade and I had a teacher named Mr. Bridges, Jerome Bridges. I'll never forget this man's name. And I used to go to a charter school for like a year or two. And ironically, he was less conventional than a lot of teachers that I had at the time, but he used to engrave hip hop in his class, like just give little references. He taught a math class. So he used to give little references, you know, he would do like little math problems. He would incorporate a people's favorite rapper at the time. At the time, Lil Wayne was huge. You know what I'm saying? He was on the rise. So, you know, Lil Wayne was like a big factor in our class. And I was a big Lil Wayne fan. And then he used to do this thing at the time too. After our tests, the days we had math test day, he would let us play rap music in the class for the rest of the day. So it kind of motivated people like me to get an A on my test, because then he would allow us to listen to music for the rest of the class. He would play it on the speaker and we'll be singing along and stuff like that. But that's the only time I had a teacher that, like, you know, allowed me to, you know, kind of have that experience in their class. You know what I mean? And then just to share y'all a story that ties into that, he actually, one time I was writing a rap in his class while he was teaching, and he called me up and in front of the whole class made me rap the rap in front of everybody. He was like, "You must be doing something that's important that you're not paying attention in class." And then he was like, "What are you doing?" And I told him I was writing a rap. And then he was like, "Well, read it to the class if you want to be a rapper. This your time to show people." And that was the first time I had performed a rap in front of a whole bunch of people. So I'll never
Yeah.
forget Mr. Bridges for that.
Do you remember the bars?
No, I don't. Wait, let me think. I think I said uh is young Ruben. I never stop rapping. You know I keep a full house. Call me Bob Saget. Like a wizard. I got that magic. I'm electricity shocking you with static. I'm very hot and you're just warm. I'm a tornado, you a thunderstorm. Yes, I'm a twister. You're a thunder. Can't see nothing. Call me Stevie Wonder. I was 8. I was 8 years
Okay.
old. I was
Right.
8.
We see why you've come this far to earn a record deal with arguably the greatest producer of all time. It makes perfect sense. Fifth grade? Woo. All
Yeah, yeah,
right.
man.
Yeah, I see the chat get activated with some bars. But you know, it just makes me think, right? How many of our young people are filled with talents that we don't give them an opportunity to express or cultivate in the classroom, right? So as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking about a teacher who was confident enough in his relationship with you to even
Mhm.
put you on the spot, right? Because I
Right.
know when I was in school, you know, they tell you all these different things about teaching, right? And I'm like, look, there's just certain organic relationships sometimes that we have with our students that
Mhm.
maybe another teacher can't have, or you just can't teach, right?
Right.
And it
Exactly.
seems like he had something that you can't teach, right? However, now I only 20, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Kelly or Dr. Ajapong. Now 20 years, 20 years or so, we have research, right? Over 20 years of research as to why we should be using these types of strategies in the classroom and why hip hop pedagogy is a real thing that has a impact. And I'm gonna tell you how Brooklyn I am, right? I'm gonna test you real quick, Ruben. So when I
Oh,
was in college, undergrad, Lil Wayne that's when he was like at his peak, right?
yeah, yep.
But I was on campus and he was cool, but I was listening to somebody else. I think
Mm.
I was listening to.
Who from Brooklyn at the time?
Yeah.
Papoose?
Nah. I mean, Fat Fruits is nice, but
Yeah,
I never
who
really.
they was from Brooklyn. They came out around that time.
They didn't come out. They're a little. Maybe came out around the same time as Wheezy.
It's Wayne. You talking about Fat?
That exact.
Yeah,
Yup.
okay,
Yup.
okay.
Yup.
Yeah,
Yup.
yeah, 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 yeah,
That's
yeah.
what the soul tapes and
Yeah,
all of that
yeah.
was coming out. So
Nah,
yeah.
Fab was like that for sure.
Yeah, I was telling them, I was like, yo, nah, y'all heard that new Fab? They like, yo, I was like, yo,
Yeah,
did y'all heard that new Fab though?
Fab had them joints. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, that's dope. See FABO in the chat. So I want to come. I actually met Ruben at the Hip Hop Ed conference this year, right? So, Dr. Ajapon, can you tell us more about the Hip Hop Ed conference and why people should be attending this, why they should be telling other people about the Hip Hop Ed conference and just the hip hop ed movement in general?
Yeah, man, Hip Hop Ed is, I think it's a beautiful organization that just really wants that we just really want to highlight and proliferate, the use of hip hop across educational spaces. So the conference, I think we should share the dates pretty soon, but it happens in June of every year. And it's kind of like a homecoming of sorts, right? It's a homecoming where you have educators, you have scholars, you have teachers, community members, right? It's not solely for like academics, right? But it's a space where folks really just come and share what they've been doing. We have opportunities for people to present their keynotes and fireside chats, but it's a really cool space to really just connect with people, right? I think when we think about hip hop, a lot of folks here are obviously interested in hip hop, but a lot of folks go back into their schools and they're in isolation. They're the only person who does that work or who's interested in that work. So that could be kind of overwhelming. But when you come to the Hip Hop Ed conference, you're like, yo, you do this work too, or you get a new idea, something you can run back to your school and your space with. So it's just a great opportunity where we can just like, it's a great meeting of the minds around this work. I know Howard also has a conference as well, a hip hop studies conference, but like the hip hop ed conference is solely for like, we focus on education. We focus on how we can uplift young people using hip hop as an approach and a tool to this work.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I remember the first time I attended the Hip Hop Ed conference, I was just in there. Like I told everybody, well, I heard about Hip Hop Ed, and I knew about it, and I knew a lot about the work Dr. Emden was doing. But when I left, I was telling everybody, I'm like, yo, look, like, yo, y'all got to come to this. You got sharing it with everybody that I know. So yeah, if you haven't been, you definitely need to be there. You might even meet an up and coming rapper or OG rapper. Like I said, that's where I met Ruben. And thinking about the youth, Dr. Kelly, can you tell us more about the Hip Hop Youth Conference? We are not short of hip hop conferences out here, y'all.
Word. I love that for us. It used to just be one, and now it's like you could anytime, any place. So the Hip Hop Youth Research and Activism Conference, I call it HHYRA, and the young people were like, HIRA, that's way easier. So HIRA takes place every year in the spring, usually April or May. It's aligned with the K-12 school year. So we try to have this happen before, like way before or after the APs. Because once AP season hits, for those who are in high school, like kids cannot go anywhere. They're locked down in that school studying. Um, and the idea is that this conference is actually designed by young people, by high school and some undergraduate students. They come together and decide what's important to us as young people. What are we thinking about? What do we need? And then they design that learning space. So they decide who the keynote speaker is, and then they invite calls for proposals from other young people. And so sometimes there's non-youth, there's grown-ups presenting, usually as sort of invited guests, but it's young folks who are submitting proposals individually or together to really determine the kind of curriculum that they would love to see based on their lives and their needs and like who they're trying to be and the work that they're doing. And so this is an intergenerational annual youth conference focused on the intersections of hip hop and education. And the research is just in there. It happens.
Yeah. That's dope. Can you share an example of one of the like topics or themes that have come up that really, engage the audience?
Yeah, so we uh, every year, I mean, the theme, it's always about social justice and community building. But we focused on community building and love very specifically more recently because it's been hard out here for young folks. Like they feel even more every day. I don't know if they express this to everyone else who's a teacher, those in the chat, right? Like every day they express disconnection. But at the same time, when they're invited into opportunities to be in person, they tend to just like do the safe thing, which is stay home, right? I distinctly remember when the call was out a couple years ago for the Hip Hop 50. Do y'all remember this? Where young folks were invited to submit bars to compete to perform at Lincoln Center.
Yup.
And all the young folks that I reach out to, I was like, y'all, you should submit. Like, this is like my dream. Like, it doesn't even matter. I can't write bars. My parents would have found a way to make me figure out how to be MC just so they could be like, my daughter's at Lincoln Center. So I reached out to them and they were like, no, that's a lot of work. I'm good. And it wasn't about writing the bars. It was about like physically going to Lincoln Center to perform, right? And so, what they really wanted to think about was how do we create a space where young people are so engaged in this, right? And so committed to this that they want to be out, that they want to be at all the conferences, right? That they want to connect to one another. They realize that every time they stay home and choose not to be out, they're not engaging in love and justice and community work together. And so that was the theme. We got so many young people from like across the country. Folks came and presented about looking at hip hop in India, looking at hip hop in their school communities. Researchers were there trying to meet other researchers who were like all young people. And they walked away saying like, why don't we do more of this? And I was like, y'all, there's so many conferences. I was one in June. There's one at Howard. And so I realized that they really want these spaces, y'all, but they just need to know about them. And they kind of need to be dragged into them sometimes to remember that like, that's what their heart is calling them to.
Uh, yeah, yeah. So hip hop is global, right? And one of the things that we speak about with the young people, is particularly in high school right now, middle school, they're part of Gen Alpha, right? And they grew up in a world where a large chunk of their educational experience was experienced online, right? And we know that there were a lot of global shifts and getting young people out to collaborate in person and to really express themselves and develop relationships. It looks different today than it did even 4 or 5 years ago, right? So I'm glad that hip hop was a tool that allowed them and motivated them. Well, I know you played a role in that, right? But ultimately, hip hop is what motivated them to be there and show up physically. So shout out to you for that great work, and shout out to all of you for the great work that you're doing. So I have one more question before I pass the mic to Jamila. All right. And please activate the chat with some questions if you have any. I want to know, let's start off with you, Ruben. Who are your top three MCs of all time?
Loaded question.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Andre 3000, Nas, and Jay.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And Brooklyn always finds its way in there.
For sure.
Like
Yeah,
so, you
that's my
said
top three.
Andre 3000, Lil Wayne, and the last person. Sorry,
Jay.
Jay
Yeah.
Z. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to hear you say Jay one more time. Not messing with you. All right, Dr. Azure Palm, I'm gonna come to you. Who's your top three?
Yo, Jay's number one, always. I struggle with the other two. J. Cole's up there for sure.
Mhm.
And I don't entertain this question, but for y'all, I will. And I've always had Big, but this Clips album, and I've always been a Clips fan, so I got to put the duo in there for me for top three.
Okay. So we got the clips. All right. So we got Jay two times, two times, two times. It's
I
my
got
he's my
Jay.
number. This my number one. All right, Dr. Kelly, we all come to you.
I similarly have criticisms of the question itself, but I'll go with it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Because anyway, Nas, Pac, and then it's a toss up between Black Star and Outkast. I know it's cheating because there's two, but they're like fundamental to who I am in this earth. So like, yeah, Black Star and Outkast.
Okay, well, we got Brooklyn in there again. All right, so I'll accept it. I love that, and I love I love that pushback. Right, the question, you know, like Ruben says, a loaded question. It could be a problematic question. So I'm gonna let y'all know when we have the We Do It for the Culture podcast launching. We're gonna invite y'all back on for that conversation. All right, where it's a little less academic and just really diving deep into hip hop. So be ready for that. We're gonna be hitting y'all up. All right. I want to thank y'all for engaging with those questions that I had for y'all. And Jamila, I'm gonna pass the mic to you.
I don't think you're gonna get off that easy, Kareem. We need to hear your top three.
Oh, y'all want mine? All right. So it's a loaded question. It could change from time to time. But I'm gonna go Jay-Z for sure, always. Just really these past 2 weeks. There was a drop your flag challenge going on in New York, like just talking about gangs and switching our mindset and helping the young people figure out different ways to navigate life. So Styles P, right? He had a large back and forth online about that. Styles P's always been one of my favorite. He got a line when he said on his on the first Lots album, he said back when my mom played my father's role, right? And I know that moms cannot play the roles of fathers, but when I first heard that line, right, like growing up with my only having my mom, like there's other parts in that verse that I can't share, right? It gets very raw, but that just always touched my heart. So Styles P, Jay-Z, and then I am gonna go with Lauryn Hill. I don't know if she got enough music to be considered top three, but today I'm gonna go with her just because I feel like she needs to be a part of this conversation that we having.
All right.
All right, it's your turn, Jamila.
Yeah. You're a biter a little bit. Because Lauren's in my top five. All right, so we're gonna go with Lauren. And again, I gotta take it back to Philly. So Black Thought. You can put Black Thought up against anybody. I don't care. I'm standing on that. I'm standing on it. And then Andre 3000. Absolutely. And then I see some of my other, if we were going to go top five, people put them in the chat. Ghostface, definitely. And Rakim. Got to start at the nucleus. All right, so we have a few questions in the chat. I'm going to start off with La Swift. Have you ever thought or worked with youth in residential settings who also go to school at juvenile justice, child welfare, mental health programming? And I'm paraphrasing. But have you ever worked with youth in those types of settings? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah,
that's open for anybody.
I've worked with young people who were incarcerated in the Bronx at Horizons, to juvenile detention center, using hip hop and mental health. And I mean, it's not much different than a traditional K-12 classroom working with young people, but there's such a high level of engagement with these young men who are in this correctional facility, just because I think the various reasons and ways why they're there is because they lack the engagement and connection to their school. So imagining cooking them using hip hop before they engage and before they had challenges. I always think about that. But engagement is always there, and it's always a good time working with youth at Horizons.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ajapon. Anyone else had a similar experience or want to chime in for that?
I can add very quickly. I've been working with someone who does literacy work, specifically family literacy work with so it's not with young people who are incarcerated, it's with parents who are incarcerated and connecting them with their children through literacy. And our conversations were that essentially she said that she's like, yeah, the young folks aren't really doing the reading. So they would assign a book and say, like, you're reading this, and then your parent is reading this, and you can have conversations about the book. And she was like, I don't know how to get young people to do the reading. And I was like, well, what if the reading isn't a book per se, right? What if it's hip hop lyrics? What if they're listening to the new Clips album and like, but looking at the lyrics and really like digging into it and then having that conversation, they might be more likely to read the text, especially the young folks, right? But also like what interesting conversations they can have, right? If we're looking at hip hop as a literature as opposed to canonical or traditional approaches to literature. So that's something it's still in the works, right? We're still in process. But I thought that was a really exciting project.
Amazing. Yeah. Shout out to the Clips, or they are, I mean, arguably the album of the year, or Ruben's about to launch, so I may take that back in a couple weeks. I may have to take that back. All right. And we have another question in the chat. And forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, Alexia. What keeps you motivated in this work, and how can we start with our earliest learners? Our earliest learners.
I mean, I can answer the first half. The first half, what I can say to that, what keeps me motivated in this work, I think the biggest thing, that there's a few things that keep me motivated. The factor of the matter that, um, again, like we said earlier, I get to educate, I get to inspire, I get to motivate other people who look like me. And then another thing is I get to do something I love. This is super passionate for me. I would be rapping if I wasn't making no money off of it. So the fact that I even get to live out my dreams and be able to make a career off of it is a blessing for me. So those are the two things that motivate me: being able to inspire other people and be able to motivate other people, be a positive impact, and then obviously be able to do the things I want to do every day, like this.
Okay, doing it for the love.
Yes.
All right. Anyone else want to respond to that?
When everybody, there's always a challenge, like, oh my God, young kids in hip hop and the misogyny and the violence. And I'm like, yo, there's misogyny, violence, and all that everywhere in our society, right? I always tell folks, I think a great intro for the young babies is like just teaching them about the history of hip hop, right? Just so they have, young people who are not babies don't have a clear understanding of the history of hip hop. I think that's really important. And also like to think like, look at these like responsive and age appropriate songs for young kids like Gracie's Corner, and other alternatives that are responsive to, I think, the genetic code of, young people of color.
Mhm. Absolutely. And then also making that distinction, right? Because Dr. Ajapon, you said, people still have this misconception that what they think students are listening to is hip hop culture. And a large part of that, I mean, this is probably another webinar, is rap culture, right? And so making that distinction and educating the adults so they know what to put in front of the babies is really important. All right. So and then we want to just shout out Alex for sharing some of the work that is happening in terms of teaching the history of hip hop to kinder and sixth graders. Yes, absolutely. Kindergarten moving on to graffiti, breakdance, and beatboxing, and keeping them engaged. Absolutely. All right. So with that said, I want to thank our panel this evening. Give it up. I mean, we need to incorporate an air horn or something, but I just want to give it up for our panel. What I heard was just the power of leveraging hip hop culture as a teaching strategy, as pedagogy, right? And so, Dr. Ajapon, Dr. Kelly gave us the why and the how, and Ruben really brought us home and making sure that we are, our stories are speaking to our soul, right? And making sure that we are being our authentic selves. And so with that said, shout out to the teacher, Jerome Bridges, for passing the mic to Ruben and, starting him on his journey. We are so grateful for that. Each one teach one. And I also want to bring up that We Do It for the Culture is featuring one of Ruben's tracks and interviews that's coming up in a lesson that's going to be released coming up soon. So we will make sure that we send that out to all of you. And in order to access the lesson, you can subscribe to WeDoItForTheCulture.com, and we're going to drop the website in the chat. Again, it's the only culturally responsive social emotional learning curriculum that's rooted in hip hop culture for grades 6 through 12. And so we want to make sure that everybody knows where to find our amazing panelists. So I'm going to ask each one of them to please share where can they find more information about you. We're also going to drop some things in the chat, and we're going to send some things out to everyone. But if you just want to share it for the recording, please share where people can find your information and socials. And any other projects you have coming up that you want to share with the people.
I'm dropping my website and my Instagram in the chat, but also we're launching the journal for hip hop and education. So that's on Brill's website. I'll put that in the chat too. So if any educators or scholars who want to contribute some writing and scholarship to this work, feel free to submit to the journal.
Dr. Ian Levy, who was mentioned earlier, I think by Jamila Sams, who's my colleague at Rutgers, he and I just launched the Rhyme Lab at Rutgers, which is a space to really bring together folks who are engaged in hip-hop-based research and scholarship to write together, to work on manuscripts, to submit to Dr. Ajapong's journal, and to work on being in fellowship on creating rigorous and really useful scholarship that is for the community, that is for this family, and that also pushes us towards what comes next.
Shout out to everybody. I go by Ruben Vincent. That is REUBENVINCENT. My Instagram and Twitter is in the chat. My name is Ruben Vincent on all streaming platforms. I got a collaboration album coming out with Ninth Wonder October 24th called Welcome Home. We just put out the first single called Gotta Get It with a B-side called Queen City. Yeah, and that video should be coming out Wednesday.
All right. Like you said, you gotta get it. All right, and let's give it up for our MC, Master of Curriculum, Kareem McQuilkin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Host extraordinaire. All right, I want to thank you all for everything that you do for the culture. And I want to thank you, everyone in the chat, for joining us this evening. Let's just stay focused and make sure that we are lifting up hip hop culture always front and center. All right, we got one more shout out, Dr. Jason Rawls. Yes, will be the inaugural lecturer at the Rhyme Lab at Rutgers. Dope. Shout out to Dr. Rawls. All right, thank you all. Thank you for doing it for the culture.
Yes, thank y'all for real. We appreciate y'all. This is the first one for the school year. So, we just want to shout y'all out, man. We really wanted to make sure we centered hip hop, and this was a great, diverse panel of experiences. So, man, I'm feeling really good.
Hip hop is alive and well. Don't let anybody tell you anything different.
Yeah.
Love y'all. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Love y'all too.
Love y'all too.
Bless.